The Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Pride Seeds, Cruiser Max Vibrance Beans, High Stick NT, and the Manitoba Pulse and Soybean Grower.
Peter Johnson, RealAgriculture.com, and we're back talking double crop soybeans with Richter from Syngenta Seeds, and this is the nuts and bolts. So, the things that matter in terms of making the decision. Eric, let's start with planting date. How critical is every day? You said in the earlier session up to July 15th with 2,900 heat units, but it's July the 10th and I want to spread my manure. How important is every day?
Every day after July 1st equals a bushel per acre. So that's it. Bottom line, at least our data clearly shows at least a bushel per acre loss from day 1, July 1st to July 2nd to July 3rd, July 10th to July 11th.
Okay, so if I start with 30 bushel yield potential or 35 on July 1st, by July 15th I'm at 20 bushel or 15 bushel, and
that's right.
Why would you do it?
After July 15th, in most cases, you would either be in the ultra long season areas like Chatham, the Deep South, or you would do it for cover crop purposes.
And if you're going to do cover crop, you might as well not use soybeans.
Mix them in with some other species.
Yeah, mix them in maybe. Okay, fair enough. So really, you said a bushel per acre per day. That's sort of like one day in July is worth 3 days back in May. Because
that's right.
Every day we delay, corn's a bushel, wheat in the fall's a bushel, soybeans are a third of a bushel. So really, really important to get that crop out of the field. Incredibly important to, say, harvest the wheat at 22% moisture, get it out of the field, pay for the drying, and that way we can plant 3 days earlier. If we do that, that's 3 bushels, right?
Exactly. Everything that a grower can do, they need a plan. That's the first thing. They need a plan. And so everything the grower can do to build into that plan to harvest early, and if they're removing the straw, whatever that may be, even spreading the manure, get that timeline such that you can get those beans planted as soon as possible.
Okay, so planting date is number 1. What about number 2? How about maturity on the soybeans? I was always taught that I went with full season varieties because that way they didn't get too short, they turned off in the fall. What about maturity? Where are we at?
Actually, I think maturity is the most critical criteria to make the system successful. Growers should take the time to figure out, and there is a strong interaction between the planting date and the optimum or best fit variety. And so as we plant on July 1st and we plant on July the 15th, it may not be the same variety recommended. In fact, I would really encourage the growers to downshift if possible through that period of 2.5 weeks.
Okay, so how much do they, I normally, at my farm, I normally grow a late group 1, for example.
Yes.
So I'm going to plant on July 1st. How much do I shorten up?
On July 1st?
Yep.
You would shorten up at least 0.75 maturity.
So 3/4 of a maturity group. And by July 15th, I would shorten up how much?
On July 15th, we're over 1.5.
1.5. So basically,
we're down to almost a double zero.
Yeah, so we're basically going from, half a maturity group at least,
yes,
if you're double crop, to maybe as much as 2 full maturity groups. 1.5 for sure, yep. So,
that's right.
So it's really important in terms of shortening that up to match your planting date to get that maturity. What happens if they don't mature in the fall? What do I end up with?
Well, our data shows roughly 1,000 pounds of dry matter, and there is an N credit. We'll have a discussion really about what that is, but our data shows 80 to 100 units of N. There is a significant N credit there for the grower, so not all is lost.
In terms of a marketable crop, where do I end up with?
Non-marketable
crop, like it's just pretty tough going.
So the risk is very high where we stretch the maturity in a double crop system. It is not conducive to mitigating risk.
Right, we
don't want the growers to go there.
Okay, so first off is planting date, second is maturity. So what about seeding rate?
Yeah, great one. There is a strong interaction between the planting date and the variety to some extent, but the planting date and population. We really have found through the work we've done with the growers that we need to increase the populations to start with. At July 1st, many fields we would be targeting that 225, 250 in that range, and then we would jack it up and all the way through to July 10th, 15th, 250, 275, even possibly 300,000 seeds per acre. And I know that's a lot, but our goal here is to have canopy closure by R1, first flower.
Yeah, and so that's really
seeded with a drill. And this is the only way you can achieve that.
So that was the next one is row width, right? So we're going to 300,000, but that's not 300,000 in 30-inch rows.
No, not what. No, to make the double crop system work here in Southern Ontario, I would stand in front of a group of growers and say, with no hesitation, no wavering, it has to be with a drill or an air seeder and narrow row, 7.5. There are a few at 15s. 15s, those growers struggle to break 35.
Yeah, and that's basically because we got to intercept the sunlight, right? We have to immediately intercept all the sunlight we can.
Exactly.
And so it's 7.5-inch rows, high population.
Yes.
So what about moisture? How important is moisture? It's the July the 5th, and this barley crop, it's already pulled a lot of moisture out of the ground. In fact, right now when I go to wheat fields, they have cracks in them.
Yes.
And meanwhile, the corn and soybeans aren't feeling any drought stress at all because they haven't used any of the moisture. Yeah. So it's July the 5th, I'm going to plant my double crop soybeans. It hasn't rained at all for 3 weeks and there's no rain in the forecast. Do I plant or don't I plant?
You have some time to wait, but if the soil's bone dry and forecast is no rain for 3 weeks, we could very well be outside the window past July 15th. Don't do it.
Yeah, so you really do need good moisture somewhere in there to make this system work.
So there's a couple ways. One is I found it's really interesting. In late April, early May, we would never recommend to a grower to seed soybeans at 3 and even 4 inches deep. Don't ask me why, but we've seen double crop come up from 3 and 4 inches. The soil temperature and the ability to extend the hypocotyl is very different than it is in the early spring. So at all costs, try to put those beans into moisture. And I know you and I have talked about planting depth many times, but there is something different about the double crop. Don't be afraid to go to moisture, go deep.
Yeah, and I wonder, I don't know, but my hypothesis would be the soil is so warm that the hypocotyl will extend more because temperature and extension is kind of interrelated there.
So like our edible bean approach, that's right.
Yeah.
In terms of moisture though, for the growers that have livestock, liquid manure, they are in a sweet spot where they can put on 3,000 to 4,000 gallons, and that's enough moisture to actually help bring the soybeans through. But moisture at planting, yes, that's challenge number one.
Yeah, and moisture through the growing season is also going to still have a big
challenge
impact.
Number 2.
Challenge number 2. So there you have it. I really think there are 5 key factors. I think it comes down to planting date is incredibly critical, even way more, like every day makes such a big difference. Then I think it really comes down to the maturity, and that's totally different than where we were 5-8 years ago.
Agreed.
We're now saying shorten that up to make sure you have marketable beans. Then we get to population, row width, and then moisture. And that's both. Moisture is planting depth. Make sure if you can at all to get them into moisture. And then all you can do is pray for rain.